The clash didn't begin with shouting or raised voices. It began with a pause so sharp it cut through the noise of the crowd. Cameras were rolling, microphones were up, and the atmosphere felt routine, until it wasn't. In front of dozens of reporters, Dakota Johnson stopped the moment cold with a response no one was prepared for. Just seconds earlier, everything had seemed normal. The event floor buzzed with the usual mix of controlled chaos and polite laughter. Sam Heughan stood confidently, speaking with the ease of someone used to commanding attention. He leaned into the question, relaxed, maybe too relaxed, as if the moment belonged entirely to him. Then came the comment. It wasn't loud, it wasn't aggressive, but it crossed an invisible line, one that only the people standing there could feel immediately. The kind of line that doesn't exist on paper, but everyone knows when it's been stepped over. Dakota's expression shifted, not dramatically, not theatrically, but decisively. She cut in before the sentence could fully land. Her voice stayed calm, almost measured, yet firm enough to erase the smile from Sam's face. It wasn't a rebuttal meant for debate. It was a shutdown, clear, final, and unmistakably public. For a brief moment, no one spoke. Reporters froze, unsure whether to follow up or pretend they hadn't just witnessed something raw and unscripted. Sam blinked, visibly recalibrating, as if trying to decide whether this was a misunderstanding or a deliberate challenge. The power dynamic had shifted, and it happened in less than 3 seconds. Dakota didn't elaborate. That was the most unsettling part. She didn't explain herself or soften the impact with humor. She simply held her ground, eyes steady, posture unmoved, as if daring the moment to push back. In a space designed for performance, she chose restraint, and that restraint spoke louder than any argument. Sam attempted to respond, but the rhythm was gone. His words came slower, more cautious, stripped of the confidence he had seconds earlier. He laughed lightly, a reflexive attempt to dissolve the tension, but it didn't work. The laughter hung in the air, unanswered, exposing how off balance he suddenly felt. Behind the cameras, handlers shifted their weight. One publicist glanced at another, silently asking the same question everyone else was thinking. Was this still salvageable? The red carpet thrives on illusion, on smooth transitions and controlled narratives. Dakota had interrupted all of that with a single boundary drawn in real time. Phones were already lighting up. Clips began circulating before the exchange was even over. Captions framed the moment as a heated row, but those who watched closely knew it wasn't heat, it was precision. There was no emotional spill, no visible anger. Just a line drawn, and a refusal to step back. Sam nodded, listening now instead of leading. The body language told its own story. His shoulders tightened, his stance less open than before. He glanced briefly toward the press team, then back to Dakota, as if silently asking whether this was truly happening in front of everyone. The crowd sensed it too. A murmur rippled outward, subtle but unmistakable. This wasn't the kind of exchange meant to be forgotten by the next question. It had weight. It suggested history, unresolved tension, and perhaps a frustration that had finally reached its limit. Dakota ended the moment the way she began it, by disengaging. She turned slightly away, signaling that the conversation, at least on that subject, was over. No dramatic exit, no final word. Just a quiet reclaiming of control in a space where control is rarely surrendered voluntarily. As the microphones lowered and the cameras moved on, the damage was already done. The moment would be replayed, analyzed, slowed down, and argued over. But standing there, in that brief pocket of silence, it was clear this wasn't just an awkward exchange. It was a confrontation that had been waiting for an audience. And now that it had won, nothing about the rest of the night would unfold the way it was supposed to. Once the cameras moved on, the tension didn't dissolve. It followed everyone into the quieter spaces behind the event floor, settling into conversations that suddenly felt cautious and unfinished. What had played out in public was now being replayed privately, stripped of smiles and press-ready language. In those corridors, no one questioned whether the clash had been real. For Sam Heughan, the shift was immediate. People noticed he spoke less, listened more, and deferred in ways he hadn't earlier that evening. The confidence that usually anchored him seemed temporarily displaced, replaced by a careful awareness of how every word might be interpreted now. The moment had taken something from him, not permanently, but noticeably. Across the room, Dakota Johnson remained composed, though no longer detached. Those close to her sensed a release, as if something long contained had finally been allowed to surface. She didn't celebrate the confrontation, but she didn't retreat from it either. There was a quiet resolve in how she carried herself, an understanding that what was done couldn't be undone. Speculation spread quickly among insiders. Some suggested the exchange was the result of accumulated frustrations, small dismissals and boundary crossings that rarely make headlines but leave lasting impressions. Others believed it was about control, who gets to frame a narrative, and who is expected to remain agreeable while it's done. In either case, the clash felt less spontaneous than it appeared. What complicated matters was the absence of clarification. No immediate statement was issued. No friendly photo followed to smooth things over. The silence that came afterward only amplified the impact, allowing every viewer to project their own interpretation onto the moment. In modern celebrity culture, silence is rarely neutral. Publicists moved swiftly, though quietly. Interview schedules were adjusted, questions redirected, and talking points refined. These were subtle maneuvers, invisible to most audiences, but unmistakable to anyone familiar with the choreography of damage control. The goal wasn't to erase what happened, but to contain it. Online, the reaction fractured into opposing camps. Some praised Dakota for asserting herself publicly, calling it a rare display of authenticity in a space built on performance. Others defended Sam, arguing that public correction crossed a professional line and should have been handled privately. The debate wasn't just about two individuals. It tapped into broader conversations about power, respect, and visibility. What made the moment linger was its restraint. There was no explosive follow-up, no dramatic escalation to satisfy short attention spans. Instead, the tension remained unresolved, inviting repeated viewings and endless analysis. Each replay revealed something new. A glance, a pause, a choice not to speak. As the night drew to a close, the event itself faded into the background. Awards were handed out, speeches applauded, and headlines written. Yet the most discussed moment involved neither a trophy nor a performance, but a boundary drawn in real time. That imbalance spoke volumes about what audiences truly respond to. In the days that followed, the narrative continued to evolve. Interviews referenced misunderstandings and context, without ever fully addressing the core of what happened. The ambiguity kept the story alive, feeding curiosity rather than satisfying it. It was a reminder that not all truths arrive fully formed. Ultimately, the clash reshaped how both figures were seen, if only slightly. Sam appeared more human, more fallible, while Dakota emerged as someone unwilling to let moments slide for the sake of comfort. Neither role was absolute, but together they formed a story richer than any rehearsed exchange. And perhaps that is why the moment endures. Not because of what was said, but because of what was revealed in the space between words. In an industry obsessed with control, a brief loss of it can feel like a revelation, and once seen, it can't be unseen. In the days that followed, the narrative continued to evolve. Interviews referenced misunderstandings and context, without ever fully addressing the core of what happened. The ambiguity kept the story alive, feeding curiosity rather than satisfying it. It was a reminder that not all truths arrive fully formed.